Well, pizza's always been my first job. I started when I was 16 years old and I loved it so much I just never stopped. And after I graduated from college, I got the opportunity to move over to San Francisco for a big restaurant and take over as the kitchen manager and take over that restaurant. And from there, it just kind of expanded from there. I learned how to run a restaurant. I learned how to teach people. I learned so much about pizza, all the different styles of pizza. And then that's when I started competing, and it all just grew from that first job. So the first boss I ever had was a very big name in the industry, Tony Gemignani, and he took me to a competition in Italy, and it was the first time I had ever seen a competition, and it was in 2011, and I was still a college student, but I was studying abroad in Italy and I was living there, and it was my first introduction to the competition world. And a few years later, when I had moved back to the States, I had decided that I wanted to give it a shot myself, and he had told me that I could go. And so we went to Parma, Italy in the north, and that was the first time I had ever won a competition. And I had won first place in the pan styles, which is why I do so many of the pan styles. I absolutely love it. But I was the first American and the first woman to ever win that competition. And from there, I got the itch. I love competing, I love competitions. And so from there, that was the first one I ever won, and that was in 2014. And then I've won 2 more since then. The competitions vary depending on where you are. Usually the style of pizza that is most prevalent will determine where you go. So for instance, in the north, usually it is the classic category, so a classic round pie, or the pan styles. Otherwise, if you go to Naples, for instance, of course, you're competing for Neapolitan pizza. And then here in the United States, there's other competitions as well, and it kind of varies depending on the category that you choose to be in. But depending on that category will be where you go. The competitions are huge. Usually in the biggest categories, there can be as few as 100 people, and as most as I've seen, 600 people in one category. And so you're competing against almost 600 people for one first prize. And usually the way it works is you have your oven judges in that portion of the competition. They judge you on technique, they judge you on cleanliness, they judge you on your performance and the way that you look, your dress, how you present yourself, and then it goes to your tasting panel. And usually, so in Italy, there's a tasting panel of anywhere to 4 to 5 judges. And pretty much you get about 30 seconds to a minute to explain as much or as little about your pizza as you can. And then it's the judge's turn. And the judges can ask you any question or questions that they want. Sometimes they intentionally try and make you mess up. So they'll ask you questions that will kind of lead you to the wrong answer, and or they'll just ask you a ton of questions. And so usually they're just trying to gauge, do you know what you're doing? Do you know what you're talking about? Did you in fact make this pizza? Or maybe did you have help to do it for you? Like, did somebody else make your dough? Or anything like that. And then after that, those two sets of scores will come together to make your final score. And so when you've got 600 people that you're competing against, your odds are very small. Most of all of this is held in Italian. If you don't speak it, then you need a translator. A lot of the time, I do speak Italian, so I usually do all my presenting in Italian, but usually my last name gives it away, and they always ask me, it's always at the very end. I get through the whole competition, and then they always ask me to come back, and they ask me where I'm from. And that's usually when it blows my cover, but. Well, the unique thing about my restaurant is that we do all 4 styles of pizza that you see in my class, but the unique thing about it is that you get to pick your crust style, and then you get to pick your topping combination. So a lot of the times when you see different styles of pizza in one restaurant, you normally have a preset number of pizzas assigned to that style of pizza, and that's it. You don't really get very many options because it can be difficult to execute that many different styles of pizza in one roof. So usually you pick one and that's it. Whereas the way that I've designed my menu is that you get to pick whatever crust style you like, and then you get to pick your topping combination. So pretty much it gives you an endless number of options without having to completely overcomplicate it. But being from California, of course, to me, everything is local. So all my products are locally made, whether it's only from an hour or two away, like my tomatoes, my mozzarella is from the US, my flour is only from about 2 hours away. So for me, the ingredients should be more local. My next personal challenge, I want to compete again. I haven't competed in a long time because I've kind of morphed into more of a judge and I've done a lot more teaching, but I definitely want to compete again. But professionally and career-wise, of course, I want to expand my brand. I want to expand my restaurant. I'm already working on location number 2. So that's growth is the plan. Judging can actually be really hard because a lot of people think about it as glamorous because you're sitting at a table all day and all you're doing is eating. And so everyone thinks that judging is glamorous when in actuality it's pretty hard because you lose your palate after so many pizzas. So you can't really taste the same at the end as you can in the beginning. But the cool thing about it is you actually learn from the people that you are judging because you see their techniques, you see what they're doing, how they apply their toppings, and you can't help but learn something from it. You can't help but learn 1 or 2 new tricks from it. So I like judging. If you've never tried making pizza, honestly, the biggest hurdle is to jump in. It can be really daunting and scary making your own dough, but that's kind of part of the adventure. It's gonna be messy. It's gonna be sticky. You're probably gonna ruin it. You're probably gonna mess it up or burn it, but that's part of the joy in figuring it out because you can't figure out the perfect pizza without completely ruining it 100 times before. And you learn tips and tricks that work for you and your equipment and your oven and something that's more applicable to you as opposed to someone else. And honestly, keep it simple is the biggest thing. A lot of people overcomplicate it. They think that you have to cook all of your ingredients when in actuality, a better, more stable pizza has ingredients that are put on afterwards half the time, not completely on top, and using just great ingredients, fresh, local, seasonal if you can. The easiest style of pizza to make, well, that's probably one of the hardest questions to answer just because everyone's hands work differently. But honestly, pan pizzas, no matter which one you pick, is probably the best intro into pizza because the pan keeps the pizza where you need it to be. As opposed to trying to hand stretch a round pizza, it never comes out round, especially the first couple times. You're gonna ruin it, you'll probably not be able to get it in the oven, and it's never gonna come out round. But at least with a pan, you know the pizza can only become one shape. Well, the first competition I ever won, I was probably one of only a handful of women. So maybe, if I remember correctly, probably 10, 12 women in the entire competition. Because a lot of the times in these competitions, you are allowed to have an assistant, and usually your assistant dresses like you. So you might see a lot of females, but in reality, they're actually only playing the assistant role. They're not the actual pizza maker. And so they are dressed like a pizza maker in the sense of they're wearing an apron, they might be wearing a chef coat, but they're not the ones actually making the pizza. So when I first started competing, I was one of very few women. And it was actually a surprise when they called my name as the winner, because in an Italian and lots of Latin-based languages, the words change depending on if it's a male or a female. And so when they announced the winner, they announced it as a man. And then they had to backtrack and they actually had to say, oh wait, no, it's a woman. And then I heard my name. And so it was more of a surprise for them than it was for me, because I was 24 years old at the time and I had no expectations whatsoever. It was the first time I had ever competed in Italy, and I was pretty much there for fun and had no expectations. And so when I heard my name, it was definitely a surprise, but it was definitely cool. Well, right now, Detroit is all the rage. Detroit style pizza is one of the most popular Pizza's everywhere nowadays. You see everyone doing it. It's the most Instagrammable pizza. It's that super photo friendly. It has the ooh and the ah because you get the cheese pull, but you also get that caramelized cheese edge. And so it kind of has the best of both worlds in that respect. And so right now, definitely Detroit is all the rage, but there will be more to come. Well, when I first was testing the waters of entrepreneurship, I was doing pop-ups and things like that. And because of my past experience of opening restaurants and running restaurants for someone else, I had the experience to do it for myself, just not in name. And out of the pandemic, it just kind of made it more of a sure thing for me that yes, this was in fact something I wanted to do. And so I transitioned from the pop-up to a brick and mortar and my own restaurant. And of course it was extremely daunting and really hard to do, but it's definitely well worth it. Well, my favorite restaurant in San Francisco is Kokari. It's one of those places that people don't really think about because it's a Greek restaurant, but it's actually, it's tough. Right now, it's all about Dune, my favorite movie, because the new one's coming out and I'm really excited to see it. I'm a huge reader, so. I read all books, but as a kid, I was really into King Arthur and I loved reading. So I always tend to go back to those types of books about kings and queens and things like that. Fantasy worlds. My couch, because I'm rarely ever there. Right now, honey. It depends on the mood. It's just like asking what's your favorite pizza. It really depends on your mood of the day. Sometimes it's rock and roll. Sometimes you want jazz. Sometimes you want everything.